All right, let's get into it. Um, I wanted to go over nutrition for fat loss as kind of our main topic for today because I checked based on what I could tell that we had about two-thirds of our one-on-one clients that we work with are looking for some kind of fat loss or even like toning, which fat loss or weight loss is an aspect of toning. It's just like lose some fat, build some muscle, right? So it's a very high percentage of the clients we work with. Figured it would be a very broad spectrum thing. I mean, it's still summertime, we're kind of getting to the end of summer, but we can still work on some summer bods and drop a little bit more fat, get a little leaner. I'm doing it myself. And what I'm really going to focus on today is the three main ways that I personally have used nutrition for fat loss very successfully in the past. So there's going to be some other things that we could talk about under this topic, but I want to spend time talking about the things that I have personally done to be successful with those. So we're going to go through three things. We're going to talk about calorie tracking. We're going to talk about intuitive eating, which there's a lot that goes into that. And then we're going to talk about following a meal plan. And which each with each one of those, we're going to talk about the pros, we're going to talk about the cons, we're going to talk about some strategies to implement that, and then the overall takeaway. And then at the end, we're going to do something that's very important, which is how do we be in a calorie deficit so we can lose fat while also still performing well? Because we don't want to sacrifice performance for fat loss. We want to make sure that we can do both because we can do both. And so we're going to go over how to do both. So I know you guys have the notes. Don't let the notes distract you, and just make sure that we're kind of in tune here. But it'll help you kind of follow along with what we're doing. So again, these are the top ways that I personally have had a lot of success with this. And the ways that we typically go about things with you guys, but we'll get a little bit more in detail into that. So, first things first, we're going to talk about calorie tracking. This is what probably 50% of the people who do have fat loss goals with us are going to do calorie tracking at some point. There's definitely some pros, there's definitely some cons, but it's just a matter of like what matters for you at the time. So some of the pros, it is very detailed because it is very numbers oriented. You're like, I weighed this thing, it weighed this much. I'm going to track it. I have a much better numerical understanding of what I'm consuming versus if I'm just doing one of these other strategies, kind of guessing or kind of eyeballing, going off of personal experience. So it is very detailed. It's not as accurate as people think it is because we can very easily measure, calories in that we physically consume. Very hard to measure calories out, so we go off of a lot of assumptions. What it doesn't take into account is of that food that we actually digest and absorb. So, like all of the calories eat, we don't actually use all of those. So it's not like 100% accurate. That's why if you are doing calorie tracking, you don't have to get like super obsessed with like my goal is 2000 and I ate 2005, right? It's not that accurate, but it's going to be more accurate than like eyeballing something, right? So it's more detailed. It's very easy to scale. And so we're going to talk about the stair stepper approach. My goal, and my average, I'm eating this much. My weight loss stopped. Now I can scale down. And if I eat this much, there's a good chance I'm going to continue losing weight. So it's much easier to scale because we have the numbers and it is very data driven. We can easily go up or easily go down depending on how accurate and consistent we've been with our numbers. And as the last point, very data driven and it is very trackable. So as opposed to these other strategies, like we have the numbers, like I said, right? So it's very easy to make changes. It's very easy to see how much we're eating. I'll add another pro to this that I forgot about. I'm just going to type it in. It's a good teaching tool. So it's a really good way to learn what food is made of. Like, oh, this thing is, a primarily a carb source. Like for some reason, I don't know why. I thought beans, like I didn't check. I thought beans were like a fat source for like years because I just never looked. I think somebody told me that and I never really paid attention. So I'm just like, yeah, cool. It's like a fat source. And you can once you start tracking calories, if you track that on your Chipotle bowl and you're like, oh, it's just carbs, like it's a good teaching tool. It's also good at teaching amounts. So as you spend time tracking calories, you can learn what 40 grams of protein looks like in various ways. How much chicken breast is that? How much ground beef is that? How much whatever is that, right? It's good as a learning tool to help you maybe not track forever, but implement something like intuitive eating down the line because you have a better idea of how much stuff is in the food, how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat, right? So it's definitely some good pros there. I think it's something everybody should try at some point because it is a very good learning and teaching tool, but there's definitely some cons too. So for a lot of people, tracking calories becomes like another thing to do. It's like you have to spend the time to do it. And there's, questions about accuracy. There's questions about if you're doing it right. What happens if the food that I'm looking up, if I can't find it, or if I can't, I scan it and it doesn't come up? It can become another thing to do. This has happened to me so many times where I'm like, I know when I track my calories and I'm consistent, I get results every single time if I'm consistent with it, but I can't get myself to do it because I have so much other stuff to do that weighing and measuring my food seems like something that I don't want to do. And so that leads to point number two, which is it can be overwhelming. Um, Having to weigh everything, having to measure everything, having to log everything. Like it can just become a lot, and that can derail people from being consistent with it because it just becomes too much for them. So it's very possible that for some people, like that's just going to be something that we need to maybe wait on. We need to table that for later when they're more mentally ready to do that. I find I need to be mentally like in the right place of like super motivated to track everything for it to be effective for me. And con number three is it is a learned skill. There's a learning curve to it. To be good at it and to be accurate with it, it's definitely takes time to learn how to do that. And even to learn how to use something like MyFitnessPal and use things like the copy and paste features, the saved meals features to make everything easier. There's definitely a skill component to it that just takes some time to learn. So maybe you're not doing it correctly in the beginning and it does seem overwhelming or it does seem hard, but as you develop the skill on that, it obviously gets easier. So I'll talk about some main takeaways and who this is good for, but again, you know, lots of pros, lots of some cons, just depending on what frame of mind you're at going into it. There's a couple strategies that we're going to talk about with this. And the main strategy is the stair step approach. And this is what we are having most clients do most of the time. It is essentially where we start everybody. And the stair step approach is essentially eating an amount of food, you lose some weight, eventually your body adapts, you stop losing weight. So then we have you eat a smaller amount of food, and then eventually you continue to lose weight, and then your body adapts, and then we eat a little bit less food. So we go through this stair step approach over time. What most people do, and you guys have heard me talk about this plenty of times, is people will set up their goals wrong, and they'll go to lose 2 pounds per week of calories because they want to get results as fast as possible. So MyFitnessPal is going to take like 1,000 calories a day out of their recommended calories. They're going to, you're going to get some results. If you can stick to that, you're going to get some results, but you're going to be super hungry. You're going to be miserable. And eventually, progress is still going to slow regardless. So at that point, there's just kind of you can't really go that much lower. Like you're already miserable at the amount you're eating. And so people kind of give up, their weight comes back up, they try something else, right? Instead, if we can just do this stair stepper approach, it's a longer timeline going from maintain body weight to losing zero point 0.5 pounds per week to losing 1 to losing 1.5 to losing 2. Maybe that takes us 3 months to get through that, but it's going to be consistent weight loss throughout. And it's going to be much more sustainable, much more acceptable of changes as we go, and it like kind of feels good. You're like, oh, cool. Like I hit that new level, right? Like I earned my 1.5 pounds per week deficit, right? Because you've been successful with the weight loss that whole time. Because even going from, let's say you're eating maintenance calories to setting it to lose zero point 0.5 pounds per week, that doesn't mean you're only going to lose half a pound per week. Like you're probably going to lose more if we're being honest and you're, honest about your food log. It's still going to result in weight loss. It's just going to be a longer, um, like less aggressive way to do it. That's just going to have a better outcome in the long term. The other strategy we can deploy for calorie tracking is calorie cycling. And I'm not going to talk about this because we're going to talk about this at the end when we get to the performance strategies. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to table that for later. We're going to come back to calorie cycling, which works really well when you are tracking calories. So, overall takeaway on calorie tracking, it's very good for people who are like very numbers and data driven. Like if you like numbers and you like to be detailed, you're probably going to like tracking your calories and macros. It's good for athletes whose body is their job. So I'm going to talk about precision nutrition a lot in the next section, intuitive eating. And calorie tracking is basically there's like level one clients, level two clients, level three clients. Level three is essentially pro athletes and bodybuilders. Calorie tracking is very good for them. Level two clients is like semi-pro athletes or people who are a little bit more serious. And calorie tracking can be good for them as well. Most people fit in that level one client and they don't really need something like this. Like it's for people who kind of want to be at that next level. Other takeaways, it works, but it requires work, and it's not really long term sustainable. Like you're not going to meet very many people in your life who have been tracking their calories and macros for years. Like we use it as a tool to use it for a set amount of time. Ideally, we teach you how to eat healthy in that time frame, and then we can do something like intuitive eating or something after the fact to either continue or maintain or whatever it might be. But the point is you need to learn lessons as you do it. This is the last takeaway. Learn lessons from it so that you can continue to implement after, like I talked about before, with it being a teaching tool. Okay. So that's calorie and macro tracking, one of the three things we're going to talk about today. Um, Personal story on that one. I think I've gotten pretty good results from this a lot of times. The last time I believe was summer of 2023. I combined this with some intermittent fasting, which made it just easier to track my calories. And I got really pretty lean. It's the lightest I've been in a very long time. I believe I got down to 223 pounds, which for me right now I'm about 234. Got some really good results with calorie and macro tracking a few years ago. And as a bonus, in 2020, probably two, I did it again, and that's when I was doing the ice bath every day. So ice bath every day on top of calorie and macro tracking, I actually got results way faster from doing that. And that's a totally different subject on why that worked because there was a very particular way of using the ice bath that helped me actually burn extra calories. But I did find results were faster from that. So just an interesting little takeaway. I'm happy to answer questions about that if we want to swing back around that at the end. Intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is the next thing we're going to talk about. And this is basically just like learning how to eat healthy, right? You're not necessarily tracking, you're not counting calories. You just know how to eat healthy. You know how to listen to your body and you know kind of what your body needs at that point. And I would say this is probably the goal that we want most people to get to for just long term health and fitness, to have a good relationship with food, and to just know how to be healthy. Okay. So there's also a few different strategies and few ways we're going to talk about this. We're going to spend a lot of time on this one. So the pros, it teaches you how to listen to your body. So especially if we're doing this for weight loss, you start to listen to like, how does this food make me feel? Reflecting on the day before, how did I eat and what changes do I need to make? Am I actually, you have to pay attention to, like, am I actually eating too much, right? And there's some certain cues that we can talk about so you can learn what that really feels like. It also helps you learn about healthy eating. Like if you're not tracking and recording everything you're doing, you are kind of forcing yourself to learn how to eat healthy. Because if you're doing calorie and macro tracking, I don't know if you guys remember, like it probably got really popular in the 2010s. If it fits your macros, basically, like as long as the numbers equal out at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you eat because you're going to be in a calorie deficit no matter what. And so it's like it could be Pop Tarts and candy and Burger King, but like you're still in a calorie deficit so you can lose weight. That doesn't really work with intuitive eating. You basically need to learn more about healthy eating to make intuitive eating work because you're not being as detailed on what you're talking about. And I think if I could take a couple steps back, I do need to preface when we're talking about nutrition for fat loss, like we have to be in a calorie deficit. This is not debatable, right? There's the means of how we get into a calorie deficit is kind of what we're talking about. But essentially, all of these things are taking us. They're different means to the same ends of like being a calorie deficit. And we can argue about hormones and we can argue about insulin and all these different things. But at the end of the day, if you are eating less calories than if you're consuming less calories than you're burning throughout the day, you're going to lose weight. It's just we're discussing different ways to go about that. So we do still need to be in a calorie deficit regardless of which way we're going about this. Side point. Main point, but side point. And the pro number three I have on here is it is easy to maintain for long periods, right? So like We know how to eat healthy. Maybe we've done calorie and macro tracking. This is like sustainability. This is like lifelong. I know these foods work for me. If I need some cheat meals, like I can make this work. I know how to get back on the train. I know like I might not get my fastest, best progress doing this, but I'm happy where I'm at. I can lose a little bit of weight if I need to, but I can also live my life, right? Super big pro for this one. Some of the cons is it's obviously less accurate because we're not tracking everything we're eating. It's not going to have the same level of accuracy as these other ways that we're talking about. And that's okay. I mean, again, we're using this just like before as a learning tool. That also means it's generally slower. So even if we're using this as a fat loss tool, it's probably going to take more time to get the results because we need to do more basically not like guess and check but like reflection on what we're doing. So you kind of have to like eat a certain way for a little bit, see if you're making progress, and then it's like, okay, well, this isn't working, like I got to eat a little bit less, or I got to change this, or I got to change this. um, and this is kind of one of the big takeaways from it, but it's very introspective. Like you have to do a lot of thinking and contemplating about what you're eating and what you need to change so that you can continue to get results, because you don't just have the meal plan or the data right in front of you. And that's, a downside to it, but it leads to some positive upsides of learning healthy things for you. And related to that, it can just be harder to make progress for all those same reasons. You're not going to necessarily get progress as fast as you would on a meal plan or on calorie tracking. You definitely can still get progress. We just have to implement these strategies to get in a calorie deficit, which we're going to talk about right now after I shut off my notifications. Downside of an Apple Watch, it just buzzes every time. Strategies. So we'll talk about just some overall good practices first. So we're gonna do intuitive eating, and I will throw, because we have a lot of clients do food log. I'm gonna throw food log into intuitive eating. It's not like, we're just like writing down what we're eating, right? We're using it as a sort of an awareness tool. So I'll throw this in here too. But um, overall, good practice number one is focus on protein and veggies. You want that to be kind of the main components of your, main meals when you're just doing intuitive eating, because it just makes it really easy. Protein for a number of reasons. One, obviously it helps us build muscle, but from a calorie burning perspective, it is the most satiating. So protein makes you feel the most full out of carbs, protein, and fat. Protein makes you feel the most full. It also has the highest thermic effect of food, which means how many calories you burn from eating it, which you can actually burn up to 30% of the calories you consume by digesting and absorbing protein sources. And that's going to be for something like a steak, not like a protein shake, right? It's up to 30%, right? Because a steak is going to be a whole heck of a lot harder to digest, like literally chew, you're like burning calories trying to eat it, right? Um, and so very high thermic effective food. It's very satiating. And it's just overall like what we really want to focus on to like build muscle and everything else. And then veggies leads us into the next one, which is not only the fiber content, which is like super healthy for people, but it's also a very high volume thing generally. So you can eat a whole lot of stuff without a lot of calories. It fills your stomach up, takes up space from things that might have more calories. And so that just will generally lead you to eating less food overall if you focus on those two things primarily. So that is the next thing, which is eat high volume foods. So things that are low calorie density. So if we think of things that are high calorie density, that would be little bit of food, a lot of calories. Things that are very fatty are very calorie dense because fat has a ton of calories and doesn't take up a whole lot of space, right? Like oil is probably the most calorie dense thing there is because it's just pure fat, and is not a lot, right? If we look at high calorie density foods, or I'm sorry, low calorie density foods. So a lot of food, little bit of calories. That's where we want to spend our time. So vegetables are going to be in there, fruits are going to be in there, and even other things like some of my favorite snacks are skinny pop popcorn, like large volume of calories. Like I eat like this whole thing, and it's like not that many calories. Even things like rice cakes, very like high amount of food, low amount of calories. We want to spend our time eating those things so that we can eat a lot of food, be a little bit less hungry, and not eat as many calories. So that would be overall good practice number two. Good practice number three is to just try to eat balanced, right? We don't need to overthink this right now. So, just eat balanced meals as often as you can. Get your protein, get your veggies, get your carbs, get your fat. Err on the side of protein and veggies, but just stay pretty balanced overall. And then one of the most important things about being in a calorie deficit is you're gonna be a little hungry, period. Like some people may try to argue this as like a oh, it's like a bad relationship with food. It could lead to like disordered eating type of things. It's not like a more hungry is better thing. But if you're not hungry throughout the day, you are probably not in a calorie deficit. Like it's probably just not happening. And there's things we can do to mitigate hunger, and make yourself feel less hungry, like things like stimulants. Coffee is gonna make you feel less hungry than if you don't drink it. 0 calorie sodas that are going to be carbonated, if they have caffeine, they are also a stimulant. They're going to make you feel less hungry. But if you're in a calorie deficit, you should be feeling hungry throughout the day. One of the guys who I'm going to reference again later, Mike Dolce, who's a big on like don't count calories guy, he basically says like once you start to feel hungry, wait 30 minutes and then eat something. And that's a pretty good indication that you're going to be in a calorie deficit, assuming you do these things we're going to talk about next. So four just basic things there. Focus on protein and veggies, eat high volume foods, things that are low calorie density, eat balanced meals overall, and then allow yourself to be a little hungry. Sit with your hunger a little bit. I mentioned precision nutrition. I'm a precision nutrition certified nutrition coach, have been since 2016, when I finally first got it. And so they have these habits that they really want you to focus on every meal. And these are just really good things to think about every time you're eating. And the three main ones are eat slowly, eat mindfully, and eat until you're 80% full. And so they say satisfied, not stuffed. So eat slowly. As you eat more slowly, there's this disconnect between your stomach and your brain of about the time is debatable, maybe up to 20 minutes of like how long it takes for your stomach to actually tell your brain that it is full of food. There's a disconnect there. It just takes some time. So when you eat really fast, you will end up consuming a lot more food because you ate a lot more before that signal got up to your brain to say that you're actually full. When you eat more slowly, you will generally end up eating less food because there's less calories happening during that delay. Second one is eating mindfully. And this is essentially like paying attention to what you're eating, how much you're eating, and how it makes you feel. So if you've ever just like sat in front of the TV with like a, thing of chips or something like that, and you're just eating the entire thing. You're eating completely mindlessly, and you have no idea how many calories you consumed. You have no idea what you just ate. It's like all of a sudden the bag is just gone. The opposite of that is eating mindfully, which is, paying attention to what you're eating. Ideally, not eating with your phone, not eating with the TV. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and tell you I do that. I don't. But I do. I don't eat very deliberately mindfully, but I definitely don't eat mindlessly either. Right? There's a balance for me. If you want to optimize this, right? Eat very mindfully, pay very much attention to what you're eating. The other half of that is pay attention to how food makes you feel. This is something I do a lot, and it's allowed me to really narrow down the foods that work best for me because the couple hours after or the day after you eat something, if you feel like crap, now you have to go back and you can pay attention to like, oh, what did I actually eat yesterday that made me feel like this? And you can start to narrow down things that make you feel bad or cause inflammation or cause gut issues. And then you can stop eating those things. And it allows you to learn how to do that. Eat until 80% full. So satisfied, not stuffed, right? If we're truly wanting to be in a calorie deficit, we get hungry, we sit with our hunger for a little bit, and then we eat to the point that we're just not hungry anymore. But not until we're like stuffed and can't eat. If you're getting to the point where you're eating until you're stuffed, you're probably not in a calorie deficit, unless it's like the only meal you ate that day, then you might be. But it's better to just eat a little bit more spread out and just eat to the point where you're like, I'm good. Like I'm not hungry anymore. You don't have to be like bloated though. So that's eat until 80% full. So those are the three big habits that they really talk about. And then there is the precision nutrition hand size portion guides. So this is another strategy we're going to implement. I'm actually going to pull this up and I'm going to share my screen with you guys because I have it ready. So let me zoom in a little bit. This is directly from Precision Nutrition. This is and I know it's not good quality, but I'm going to walk you through it. It's basically this is the one for men and this is the one for women. It's just half or double, however you want to think about it. it's a good way to kind of decide how big each meal should be for you every time you eat a very balanced meal. So this is protein, and you should have two palm-sized servings of protein every meal you eat, two fist-sized servings of vegetable every time you eat, because now we're looking at something that's going to be a larger diameter than just the palm, right? So it's more. Two hand cups of carbs, and then two thumb-sized servings of fat. This is nuts in this example here. And this is something, if you like take this super seriously, we can use this as another cutting strategy as we go of like, maybe the next thing we do is we go to one thumb-sized serving of fat, and then we go to one some thumb size serving of fat and one hand cup of carbs, right? And then it's like some meals we have maybe none, and some meals we have more. Like this is hard because it is eyeballing, but it's really good if you're like going out to a restaurant or something like that, where you can sort of identify like how much you need based on the, extravagant amount of food that they gave you. So I am going to post these up along with my notes in the one-on-one group when we're done. And then for women, it's just half. So it's one of everything: one palm size serving of protein, one fist size serving of veggies, one hand cup of carbs, and one thumb of fat per meal. And this is for about 4 meals per day, is what they say in this. So you'll be able to see, it'll be more clear when I post like the actual screenshots in the one on one group. But I did just want to show you guys that. I tried to post it like in the notes and it just didn't work. So I'm just going to do that. But it's a good, like, kind of, just go to like, you know, don't have any other strategy. I'm just going to base off of this and just give you an idea of kind of like how much you should be eating on some various things. Other strategies here is going to be the one bite rule. This is great. I had a client take this very seriously and got really good progress from this. So a bunch of years ago, I listened to a podcast where Dr. Andy Galpin, who's extremely intelligent, was talking about how he helped one of his clients he was working with at that time lose weight. And the client would eat McDonald's breakfast for breakfast every single morning. And they would get like two breakfast sandwiches, two hash browns, and like a large orange juice or something like that. And he's like, the obvious thing would be like, just don't get that much food, and, just make it really simple that way. But what he told this guy is like, get the exact same thing that you always get, but leave one bite of everything left over and just throw it away. And so what happens is when you leave one bite of something, it's going to be on average about 10% of that food. And so you're eliminating about 10% of your calorie intake if you just throw away one bite of everything that you have left. And so I talked to one of my clients who was doing a food log about this. His name was Jacob. He was like an OG one-on-one elite coaching client. And I didn't know that he was doing this. But over the course of like the 4 months that we worked together, he lost like 16 pounds. And I was like, dude, what are you been doing? He's like, yeah, I just did that like thing that you told me about, throwing away one bite of all of my food. And I was like blown away because it worked super well for him too. And he, dove into like the food log side of things. Like he took it really seriously, but I didn't realize he was doing this and he got really good results from it. So something to kind of consider, if you're going, family's going to go to fast food joint or something like that. If you just, leave one bite left over, something like that, it can help you reduce your calories to stay in a calorie intake. The last thing we're going to talk about, because I feel like it fits in with this, is the thing that is typically the most effective for me, which I have realized recently, and that is going to be intermittent fasting. And I've been doing intermittent fasting on and off since 2013, which is before anybody knew about intermittent fasting. I read a book by a guy named Jason Ferrugia, who was like one of my OG, like, not, he wasn't a mentor, but he was like, he didn't know he was my mentor, but I just consumed all of his like personal training content, right? And he introduced it to me back all the way back then when I was like getting my undergraduate degree in exercise science and my master's degree, and people thought I was insane because like breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? People thought I was like nuts, but it since then has worked really well for me because I just really kind of don't like eating breakfast. And so it's just an easy way for me to control calories, because there's a really good chance that if I don't eat until noon or something, and then I don't eat like an asshole the rest of the day, I'm probably going to be in a deficit, right? As long as I'm like responsible with the rest of that time. It's really easy to, skip breakfast, skip your first meal, whatever, push your fast however long you want it to be, and then over consume calories the remainder of the day and take yourself out of a deficit. Very possible. But if you're just responsible and you do, the rest of these other things throughout the day, then there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be in a calorie deficit because you eliminated an entire meal's worth of food. So I had mentioned that when I was got some of my best fat loss results a couple summers ago, I was tracking calories, but I was also doing intermittent fasting. And that allowed me like deeper into my cut. I had some days where I only ate like 1,800 calories, and I was like cool with that because fasting is really good at teaching you like control over your hunger hormones. So when you first start intermittent fasting, you want to start with a smaller fast, maybe 12 hours. So like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., right? Anybody can do that. And then over time, you can extend it to 14, 16, whatever it might be. But you do need to do it slowly because as you sort of push yourself like through that hunger a little bit, your body will adapt and it'll allow you to go longer and longer into your fast before you start to get hungry. So right now, I can usually make it till like 11 or noon before I start to get hungry. And because I wasn't doing this previously for a while, and I'll easily be able to work that up to like if I want to, like 1 or 2 o'clock. And it's just kind of a way to almost stair step, just like with calorie cutting, stair step approach on calorie reduction through intermittent fasting. So it does not work for everybody. Some people it has quite the opposite effect. Some people it has really bad effect on hormones. It can be really bad for like raising cortisol levels. So if you're already high cortisol, maybe not the best thing for you, especially because sometimes you need to consume stimulants like coffee to kind of get you through your fast. So something to pay attention to from there. I don't recommend it for everybody. It's just something that has worked really well for me. But for the majority of people, honestly, it probably doesn't. I have seen more people talk recently about intermittent fasting in the opposite direction, as in like stopping eating sooner, but still eating breakfast. There's some new research coming out about that. Maybe it's better. I don't know. The really like main takeaway of this whole conversation is find what works for you. Figure out which one of these works for you in your current situation and do that. And then when your situation changes, something else might work better for you. I'm not telling you to do one of these or the other. Well, if I'm your coach, I'm probably telling you to do one of these, right? Shout out to Jen. She's on here somewhere. We're going to talk about her in a little bit. Um, but find what works for you in the moment and then, utilize that. So overall takeaways from intuitive eating is it's good for lifelong health and sustainability. It's easy to fall off and get back into your old habits, so you have to be careful with that. It's a good way to learn about your individual body and what it needs, but it requires a lot more thought and introspection and reflection on what you did, in previous days to really make it work. Strategy number three that we're going to talk about that I've had good success with is meal plans. And I'm going to be really specific on this one because I've only done one meal plan from a person. And that's the experience I'm going to talk about with this because meal plans can be all over the place. We can create a meal plan for you in Trainerize if we wanted to. They're weird. Like the meals are like very complicated a lot of times. It seems like it's like the opposite of what people want, right? But what we can't do is like write you a meal plan because technically you do have to be a registered dietitian in order to create someone a meal plan. Although there's some things like I know when I fully support this, Coach Cece is working directly with one of her clients right now to be like, these are the foods I typically eat. Like let's create a plan together to make this work. That's a totally different thing as opposed to like you have to eat this amount of chicken with this amount of rice and this like as meal one and then this is meal two and this is meal three. Like it's a very different thing. That's like working with your client to like create a plan. That's like very different, right? Um, so I'm going to talk about the meal plan that I had very good success with twice, which is a very intense, very specific thing, diet called 3 Weeks to Shredded. And 3 Weeks to Shredded is a online program created by Mike Dolce, who I referenced earlier, where it's a plan that he used for UFC fighters to help them cut weight for their UFC fights. So it's a lot about fat loss, but it's also about like water loss and things like that. So you have to be very careful with it. Um, the first time I did it, I was listening to a lot of his content, and the tagline was like lose 21 pounds in 21 days. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, I heard him say it enough times. I'm like, I just want to try this so I can learn what the hell he's doing to like get results with these people. Cause he had a 100% success rate on getting his fighters to wait for their fights. So I'm like, I just want to do this so I can learn. And the first time I did it, I lost 15 pounds in it was actually 4 weeks, 15 pounds in 4 weeks. And the second time I did it, was in 2021, I lost 17 pounds in 4 weeks. And that's probably the most shredded I've ever been in my life. Was the second time I did it, coming off of my calf injury, which also led me to jumping the highest I have in my adult life. So pretty wild. It was a very, very detailed, very specific. And there's so again, pros and cons to that. Pros, uh, the biggest pros, there's no thought required. You're like, this is what I get to eat today. Cool. No thought required. I'm just going to do what's on the plan. And that's why people like it. The other pro can be, not in this instance, but can be that it was personalized to you. This was personalized to me in like age, height, weight, gender, that type of thing, and like food allergies, which I have some. So it was personalized in that way, but wasn't like personalized. But the main pro is that there's no thought required. That's why people like it. You just do the thing, right? Now the cons are probably outweigh the pros for the specific, which was it was very redundant. So it was like the same breakfast, the same lunch, and like cycling through like three different dinners with the same two snacks for a month straight. And it was extremely redundant. Now you get kind of used to it, like cooking the same things every day, but that also leads to con number two is it was very time consuming. I was spending a lot of time cooking, getting my breakfast bowl ready every day, cooking my lunch before I went to work, cooking dinner every single night. In like, again, you get used to it, but it took a lot of time. There's a ton of grocery shopping because you're always just going through all of the same foods all of the time. Tons of grocery shopping, tons of cooking, not necessarily bad things, but very time consuming. And in this particular instance, it was very aggressive. So if you take our 3 month stair stepper approach, and you condense that level of cutting into 3 weeks, that's basically what it was. It was like 1 week at lose zero point 0.5, 1 week at lose 1 week at lose 2, like pounds per week. Like it was extremely intense. You're very hungry. But it was very like motivating because the results came very fast. Generally don't recommend this to people for obvious reasons. There's like certain like water cutting supplements that are involved, uva ursi and dandelion root, green tea 2 to 3 times a day because that's a diuretic. The like eating asparagus a bunch because that's a diuretic. So you just have to be very careful with it. Again, it's like a fighter weight cutting plan that he used with people. But I lost a ton of fat doing it also. Overall takeaway from that, a meal plan is good when you're super motivated and super dialed in because like if you cheat on a meal plan, now it's like you have no idea what you're doing anymore, right? It requires like an extreme level of discipline and focus. But it worked for me, but it created some mental barriers. So like the first cheat meal or the first day I was like off of the plan, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna like gain all my weight back as soon as I like go to eating normally. Like it created a lot of like disordered eating around that I got over, but there was like this big like anxiety around like gaining all the weight back because you're like not eating this like super strict diet anymore. So definitely some pros and cons. Other meal plans might be different. I don't have experience doing other meal plans. It could be, you probably is a completely different story. If you're doing a meal plan from a registered dietitian that is made for you, it's probably the opposite. They're usually more on the side of being conservative as opposed to being aggressive. But just to recap this, because we're getting there already, the second half will be quicker. Um, Three big things that I've had success with is calorie tracking, intuitive eating, and meal plans, and very specific ways of doing those. So, last thing I want to get into is going to be calorie deficit and performance, which to cycle back to, like, again, this is kind of like not the point, but really important, as in you guys are here to get better at volleyball and improve performance and like be good athletes. So if you're playing volleyball worse and your workouts feel like crap and you're getting weaker because you're in a calorie deficit, kind of counterintuitive, right? So how do we do both where we can decrease our body weight, we can get the body we want and the health we want while also getting better at volleyball? And one of those ways is calorie cycling. So if we go all the way back to the beginning, I said I'm going to come to calorie cycling later. This is later. So calorie cycling is really, in the most simple terms, is like more calories on the days we need more energy, less calories on the days we need less energy. So instead of, I eat uh, 2,500 calories every day. It could be some days are 28, some days are 25, some days are 22. And it just depends on your activity level for that day. Okay. And in most times that we use it, it's carb cycling, which relates to calorie cycling, as in protein and fat stay the same most days. We just modulate the amount of carbs we need based on activity because carbs are our fuel for that activity. Okay. So the goal with this is still to be in a deficit throughout the week, even though we might not be in a deficit every single day. But what really matters is, on a longer time horizon, if you're in a calorie deficit throughout the week, you're still in a calorie deficit. Okay. So example number one would be like some days you just have low days and some days you have high days. So some days you eat more calories, i.e. carbs, some days you eat less calories. And so if you wanted to do something like this, you would want your high days to be the days when you need the most energy. So that would be days you play volleyball, days you do your lower body workout, or like days you do your full body workout, right? You're going to want more calories on those days so you can effectively do those workouts. But on other days, like your off days, your recovery days, or maybe even your upper body days, you can eat less calories and get away with it because you don't need quite the same amount of energy. So those can be like your calorie deficit days or deeper deficit days to make sure you can still lose weight, but you're eating the extra food on the important days so that you can still perform. Another example would be low, medium, and high. And this is what we're doing with Jen. She's just maybe a week or two into this, but this is how we have it planned out. So we basically have high days as like days that you play like doubles, where that's going to require a lot of energy. Days you do lower body or days you do full body. So like anything involving like intense lower body stuff. Medium days would be less intense volleyball, like playing fours or like doing upper body days. And then low calorie days would be like your off days or like recovery days. So we get to another level of kind of modulation there of low, medium, and high. And I'm going to explain what all of that means and what all of that looks like right now. But the big takeaway from this is base your calories and mostly your carbs off of how much energy you need that day so that the days you need energy, you have it. Right. So, what does that look like in a practical standpoint? If we're doing low days and high days, you could do something like your high days are a calorie neutral, where if you're tracking, you are just on a neutral, like maintain body weight. But your low days can be something like a 500 calorie deficit or a higher deficit. That way, if it's like 4 low days and 3 high days during the week, you're still in a 2,000 calorie deficit throughout the week. So you're still going to lose weight. Or if it's low, medium, and high, high can be neutral. Medium would be like a 250 deficit, and low would be like a 500 calorie deficit. And this section right here is why I wanted to share the notes with you guys, because this is like a lot of like very like in-depth, detailed information where it's like it's a lot easier if you can just see and like follow along with me. This is actually the section where I wanted you guys to have the notes so that you can see something like this. So again, low, medium, high, high being neutral, medium being 250, low being 500. So throughout the week, still in a calorie deficit. Now, that's if we're doing calorie tracking, right? But what if we're doing intuitive eating? How do we make this practical? If we're doing, say, low days and high days. On the high days, maybe you just eat an extra 1 to 2 servings of carbs before you do the physical activity that you're going to do, right? Or leading up to the physical activity that you're going to do. But on the low days, you just keep yourself a bit more hungry. You eat, a little bit lower on the carb side, and you allow yourself to just sit with that hunger, like we talked about earlier. Again, most likely you're going to be in a deficit on those days. If it's low, medium, and high, high day could be like 2 extra servings of carbs before your event, whatever you're going to do, your workout or your volleyball. Medium days, you just have 1 extra serving before your, upper body day. And then low, again, is going to be lower carb, keeping yourself a bit more hungry. And so you can kind of, I think it's the easiest way is to just base everything else stays the same. You base your carbs off of how much you need that day. That's what fits really well into intuitive eating. And that takes us to the last point of this, which is nutrient timing. Big takeaway is carbs are your fuel for performance. So if you are in a deficit and you want to maintain performance, keep your most of your carbs, not calories. Keep most of your carbs before your workout or before your volleyball. So maybe, the meal before and the snack right before. For example, on my way to volleyball or like when I'm almost to volleyball, I'll eat like a banana or two, like when I get there, right? Maybe I had a little bit more carbs before I go, but it's like, I know I'm going to eat this right now. It's going to get into my system fast enough that I know I have fuel for this thing that I'm doing even though the rest of the day I like didn't eat that many carbs, right? Or it's like, okay, I'm going to work out in the morning. I'm just going to eat most of my carbs today. The rest of the day, I'm just not going to have that many carbs because I don't need them anymore. And so I'm just going to focus on my protein and veggies and fat throughout that time. And so, if we're working on maintaining performance, as long as you have the fuel before you do the performance, you're more likely to maintain your performance with that. Does that all make sense? I got one more thing to go over. So, implementing this into the last thing, which is tournament prep. And say we're leading up to a tournament day, it's something, let's make a clarification that it's a tournament that you care about, right? I have a client right now who is playing a tournament the next 5 weeks in a row. He doesn't really care about all those tournaments, right? It's volleyball. He wants to go play volleyball. Like, he cares a little bit, but he doesn't care like a ton. So I did outline what like a week could look like on this calorie cycling type of day leading up to a tournament. So Monday is going to be a low day. Tuesday is going to be a low day. These are the least important for that tournament, with Saturday tournament, I'll specify too. Least important for that tournament. So we're going to get our calorie deficit in then. Wednesday, we'll do like a medium day. Thursday, we'll do a medium day, little bit of a less deficit, but we're eating a little bit more. And then Friday is going to be a high day. Friday is going to be like calorie neutral. Like, we don't need to be in a deficit this day. We need a lot of carbs. We need to make sure our glycogen stores are full. So our muscle glycogen, liver glycogen is going to be fine. Make sure we have the carbs where we need it, primarily the muscle glycogen. And then Saturday is not a free for all, but it's a high day. You have to eat as much as you need to perform that day. And it's probably more than you think you do. If you're not eating after like every match, like eating some kind of snack, some kind of carbohydrate after every match on a tournament day, your performance on that next match is going to go down, period. You need to refuel what you just consumed or what you just burned in that match if you want to play at that level again. That's from a nutrition perspective and a hydration perspective. So it's probably more food than you think you need, because I think I looked in my last doubles tournament 2 weekends ago. I burned like 7,000 calories that day. Like, this is beach doubles. Like, you burn a crap ton of calories, but you want to make up those, until maybe after you're done, right? So you definitely need to eat more than you think you need to on that day to be able to maintain performance. That is the goal. Maintain and just have the highest level of performance you can. Then it's like, how do we get back on track after that? The next day, so that was Saturday tournament day. Sunday, I would say go to like a medium day, right? Back to like a little bit of a calorie deficit. You're most likely going to be really pretty hungry depending on the level of the tournament, but it's kind of like getting back on track. So like a medium slight calorie deficit, and then leading to Monday, we're just back on the plan, whatever the plan looks like. That's what I would recommend for that. So it's low, low, medium, medium, high, tournament day, high or really high, medium, and then back to whatever your plan is. So tying it all in for performance at the end. A lot of information, lots of me talking to you guys. Didn't really stop because I knew it was going to be a lot of information. We're at 7:54. So hopefully that was valuable information, and we can take the next 6 minutes to go over any questions on this or just questions you have in general. So if anybody has anything, now is the time.